is the day before Set 5 officially launches, and we have the 11.9 patch notes for Set 5. So let's go through and talk about a lot of the changes that they made. I'm not going to go through all the individual units. I'm going to mostly focus on what's new coming in along with the set, and what new mechanics, what new not traits, just what the set mechanics are overall, and what has changed with the base game. Okay, so start with, like I said, Reckoning is out. There's a bunch of cheat sheets you can find on the web that are from a whole bunch of different sites. Take a look at them, get familiar with a lot of the new traits, a lot of the new origins and classes. From what I've seen in composition-wise, most of it focuses on 2 or 3 traits and just kind of flexing out from there. Your core units are going to seem to be a lot smaller this set, and your compositions are a lot more flexible. Okay, so we're getting a new season pass. So let's go through some of these. Like I said, we're getting new emotes, new booms. They're keeping the Star Shard system that they had last set. Some new eggs. Looks like 3 new arenas and some new sprites. So here's first one, Chaos Pangu. Oh, he's cute. He's got a cape. How can you hate this dude? He has a cape. And the Inferno, the Chaos Sprite. So it's River Sprite, but he's on fire. Some other little legends, Magical Misfits. Oh, that's neat. Ooh, Wolfie. So we got Fenwar, a wolf. Nice. A Nimblefoot? Okay. Looks kind of like a rabbit, a raccoon. I don't know. Rat? Rat? We're going to go with rat? I see this tail. I'm just going to go with rat. Chonk. 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 Oh, Hawaiian chonk. Oh, I like... The other one don't have flowers. Okay, you had flowers. Yo, Hawaiian chonk. Some new arenas. Hopefully this video will load up nicely, so you can see. Interesting. I like the little bar. The bar is nice. I like the bar. Not gonna lie. Alright. So, ladder resets. First of all, I believe they started this off last set, but Grandmaster and Challenger are immediately unlocked. So you don't have to wait for those to unlock to get into them. This is probably what most people are going to be interesting. Everyone is going to start reckoning at Iron 2. This is the first time since I started playing TFT, because I started mid-set 2, that they're just doing a hard ladder rank reset. Don't know if this is going to apply to your MMR, but ladder-wise, welcome back to Iron 2. That's a pretty heavy hit. I don't think I've ever been dropped that low in a reset. I'm pretty sure last time they dropped us all 2. I think I was in gold, so they dropped us all 2 ranks. This is like 5 ranks for me. This is actually pretty brutal. There's a lot of playing I'm going to have to do to get this back up. They're keeping the provisional matches. Oh, and you'll gain extra LP. That's probably why they did such a hard reset, because now you'll gain extra LP for finishing top 4 during your provisional matches. But it also makes your provisional matches like super important, or else you just end up in the elo hell that is plat and diamond. Ranked rewards come out 11.10, so that'll be the next patch in 2 weeks. Players reach gold or higher, you get a Victorious Protector to meow their opponents. Meow. That's nice. Gold or higher on both halves. You also get a Fate-Stain Triumphant Protector. I guess we can't say meow to that one too. Hyper Roll. We'll talk about Hyper Roll here, but they're adding a separate tier list for separate tiers for Hyper Roll, so you can play that independent of the regular game. Anyway, let's talk about Hyper Roll. So Hyper Roll is TFT's, what they're calling their first lab. So the idea of labs is to have a different style of gameplay for TFT. And their first experiment with this is Hyper Roll. it logically, there's basically two labs I think most people want to see. One was a faster gameplay, which I think was probably their first priority, so they could get more people playing when they could play shorter games. Because that is an issue with TFT. TFT is a pretty long game. Most of your games will go 35, 40 minutes. If you make it to the end. Otherwise, it's like 25, 30 minutes. And that's pretty long. So first we have Hyperroll. The idea of Hyperroll being most of these games will last about 10 to 12 minutes, which is much more in line with your standard for competitive gaming these days. For your quick get in, get out games, 10 to 12 minutes. Some have been flexing around like 5 to 8 minutes, but this is a pretty good. This is a good first choice for them to shoot at. The main thing, Hyperroll, you start with 20 HP. Each round loss. There's no loss based on the amount of units. It's just per round, and each round the life loss goes up each time. You don't spend gold to level, and you don't gain interest gold. Instead, you just focus all your gold on your team each time. So you basically just have to decide when your roll downs are going to be. That's going to your roll downs and what your comp's going to be, along with items. The only other thing I'll say about labs, because the other lab I would really like to see, I want to see a team-based way to play TFT. I think that's kind of been a pretty big downer for the community, and especially since the recent announcement that Robin Songs and GV8 have been picked up by Team Liquid. I would like to see more team-oriented gameplay. These big if we're going to have big esports orgs sponsoring players in TFT, I would like to see something come from that in a team-based format. It sounds like Team Liquid's working on a 4v4 tournament. I know the pros love the 4v4 format. They thought it was great. They just love just crapping on each other the entire time. It seems like it's something that's pretty fun, and that I think we as players and fans would like to see more team-based TFT gameplay. But for now, this is a good first choice, so I'll take it and I'll be happy with it. Reckoning set mechanics. So the big set mechanic going around this time is shadow items. So shadow items can appear during the carousel and the armory. So the armory is another new mechanic that I guess we'll talk about next. It's the other big new mechanic that's not just being added in just for Reckoning, but is being added in for the core TFT experience. So this is like part of the base game now. So the way shadow items work, if you have a shadow component and you combine it with another item, you get a shadow item. The idea with these is that these shadow items have a significantly greater effect while often having a weakness. They're not always better than the base item, but usually they are. But they also have some sort of negative modifier usually attached to them. So as you can see, shadow items are generally more powerful than base items, but can cause more harm than good. So they have an upside and a downside. Now for the armory, like I said, the armory is not exclusive to Reckoning. It is making its debut here. It's core to Hyperroll and is likely staying around with TFT's future. So the armory is a pop-up shop. I believe it's set up at round 2 or 3 of each stage. You have the armory. There will be 2 item components. There will be a collection of item components, and you could just pick one. You can take any of them. Just a couple of random items will pop up in the armory. You pick one and you take it. It's very simple. I believe it's basically how items work in Dota Underlords, but they don't really have the item combination system that TFT has. I actually very welcome this. One of the bigger issues, particularly with 4.5, was how dedicated you had to be to your items when you were running specific comps. Certain comps just could not work without certain items. And it was very, very... in your items, you would start making items flexibly, but at some point you had to devote your items to a build. Whereas previously in TFT, we kind of just built items, and from those items we built, we could just go multiple directions from those items. You really couldn't do that here. You had to make, in 4.5, you had to make your items, and that sent you down very specific build paths. But now we have the Armory system, so hopefully that will alleviate a lot of the randomness that comes up in what items you're offered, by allowing you to just say, hey, instead of being first and having to take this crap item on a carousel and getting these crap rounds from these crap components from PvE, I get to pick this one item that I so desperately need to make this comp actually functional. It's a good add-on, but I do worry a little bit if it adds a little too much consistency into the game. We've seen in the past that one tricks have been able to ride the ladder really far, and the Armory is something I think that could allow that. That said, with the shadow components system in here, I'm not really that worried about that, but I am a little worried about it when this shadow item system leaves, but Armory stays. Anyway, new systems. So unit movement. So unit movement has changed. So we'll have to explain this, because it's always, unit movement is always something that makes people angry in TFT. So currently the way the game works, if a unit's target moves out of their attack range, it will move 1 hex to attempt to get back in range, then reevaluate its target if it is still not in range. So I've had issues with this. So, like, for example, if you ZZ rot something, but that something has no way to get to your champion, it will often, like, walk all the way around and then stop the aggro and be in your backline and hit something in your backline. And that's depressing. That was the entire point of putting the ZZ rot on a frontliner, was to have the frontline not go to the backline. So what has been changed now is that if a unit's target moves out of the attack range, it will evaluate if moving 1 hex would put it back into range. If not, it will immediately reevaluate its target. So that really doesn't fix my ZZ rot problem. But what this does mean is that if you have a unit like what's in the current set, Talon, who jumps away, the opposing unit will not take that 1 step towards Talon. It will evaluate whether or not it should be taking that 1 step towards Talon, and then maybe go somewhere else. This generally means you're going to see a lot less movement, unless the champions that are moving only move like 1 hex. If you have a unit that just like jumps all across the board, nothing's going to aggro back to it. Nothing's going to chase it down. Next, assassins can now consistently jump before other champions move, so thank God. This was an issue that I had. If you tried to like defend your backline by just like stacking all your frontliners alongside them, frontliners would just walk away and the assassin would jump on top of your backline. It was like, what was the point of this positioning? That's been fixed. I don't know if this is an issue with the current game, but it is 100% an issue on PvE. It's a big issue on PvE, particularly with like Cavaliers. Cavaliers will just run all the way out of range. Mana generation. So, this one is much more complicated. So, the way mana generation works in the game is that if you get hit, you generate mana. If you hit something, you generate mana. So, old, 6% of the damage taken pre-mitigation is gained as mana. So if you had something that was like super tanky in the front line, the damage that you were turning into mana was all pre-mitigated. So if you had like a bajillion armor, you would get like a ton of mana being targeted, but you had so much armor you weren't actually taking damage. So now it's been changed to 1% pre-mitigation and 7% post-mitigation gained as mana. So in general, what this means is most units are actually going to be casting at about the same rate. That's what analytically it works out about to be with me. Your average unit is going to cast at about the same rate. But the super tanky frontline bros that get beat in the face all day and generate infinity mana off getting beat in the face all day, they take a bigger hit to this, because the post-mitigation means that they're not going to gain nearly as much mana. It's a good change. But I can't really call a situation in the current game that this, like, significantly impacts. I guess maybe Divine would be a good example of something that this would impact, because Divine had, like, significant damage mitigation when it had activated the Divine perk. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But like I said, I don't think this will overly impact the game. It's just something that's really complicated that will probably make the game a little feel a little more smooth. Ability and item conventions updates. Attack range is now calculated in Hexit-based game. Thank God. Attack range was always, like, something that's really complicated, because you never really understood how far something could attack until you actually played it. So being able to actually look at the unit stats and being able to see its attack range in hexes, thank you. It's always something that bugs me. Spell power named to ability power. That's to go along with the changes to League. I believe League just made this change as well last set, and TFT's kind of been in the borderline where, like, half the things are called spell power, half the things are called ability power. But in general, everything's going to be called ability power, AP, no more SP. SP dead. Basic attacks renamed to be just attacks. Oh, that's not going to get complicated at all. I don't understand why they just don't call these autos. I would have rather called these autos instead of just attacks, because this is going to get complicated with a handful of champions that do, like, weird things with their spell to make various attacks do dumb thing. Yeah. Like Zed. Zed's a good example. Is Zed's ability an attack, or is it, like, added on to his attack? Who knows? All physical damage from abilities and attacks can now be critically strike and be dodged. Critically strike. I guess this is talking about some ability. I guess this is specifically calling out ability. It says attacks as well, but I think this is specifically calling out abilities that can't critically strike because they're abilities, so you need a crit gauntlet to make them critically strike, or IE, or be an assassin. And also being dodged. You can now dodge abilities. Oh, vomit. I hate dodge chance in this game. I've hated it since dodge mech was a thing. And I don't ever think they toned down dodge chance on glove. All active abilities that are not passive, can now be blocked by Trap Claw. Okay. All abilities can now be blocked by Trap Claw. I'm trying to think of abilities that weren't blocked by Trap Claw, but I'm drawing a blank. Item icons have been updated. So they updated all. This is something that'll take a second for people to get used to. All the item icons have been updated in Set 5 to match changes made with League. Some of them don't look right to me. There's a few in particular that I point at that I'm like, I didn't actually like on, like, if you look at it and think about it, you know what it is. But on instinct, you might not pick it up. Bow is a good example. Bow looks weird. I don't know. Yeah. Bow looks like a ballista more than a bow. So it's a little tricky to read, some of them. It'll take time. We'll all get used to it. But just something to be aware of. Shop Car Glow. Big upgrade. Big life upgrade. I kind of like this. So anytime you have a copy of a champion and another one of those champions is in your shop, it will have a slight glow. It won't make the glow for, like, being 2-star, but if you have just one, it'll have this, like, tiny glow, this light glow to it, that'll point out that, hey, you have this champion, you might want to pick this up so you have a pair. Shop odds. Oh, God, we're messing with shop odds again. Oh, jeez. What are we doing with shop odds? So level 7 and level 8 shop odds are being changed. Okay, so they're just pumping up the 4-star shop. Okay, we've messed with shop odds a lot in set 4 due to the chosen mechanic. And it appears now the plan is to bring them back in line to what they were before, now that we don't have to worry about finding 2-star Chosens all the time. 2-star 4-cost Chosens all the time. I'm okay with this, but dear Lord, if we have to go back and change shop odds again, I might lose my mind. Because the thing with changing shop odds is nothing quite seems to change when you need to roll quite like changing the shop odds. Everyone is after 4 and 5 costs at all times, which usually means optimally you want to do your roll down at 8, but life usually doesn't work out that way, and you end up rolling at 6 and 7. So that way you can get to 8 and then roll down and get these nice, juicy, fat shop odds here. Oh, man. Yeah, because changing shop odds really change how people play this game. So hopefully they only do this once and they don't touch this for the rest of the set. I can only pray. Do worry that like 25 does seem like a bit high to me at level 8 though. Yeah, this does feel a little high to me. I don't know how I feel about that. Lastly, round timers. So they're cutting some time out of the game. So all of these planning phases are getting hit. All the PvE planning phases are getting hit, as are the carousels are getting hit. PvE rounds, carousel picks, yeah. Like all these timers are getting cut down. Partially because they added a lot of time into the armory. I think the armory, I think you have like 20 to 30 seconds to pick your... I think it's like 20 seconds to pick out what item you want in the armory. It's really long how much time they give you. Carousel. Alright, we're changing carousels again. Less randomness, more spats, more variance. Okay. These are good taglines to make, but sometimes they don't overlap well. So the 2 and 4 carousel, one of all, so you'll get one of each item. One of all plus 1 spat goes up a little bit. The only one I always never like is this 3 spat one. This 3 spat one can always make really weird games really quickly. In 4.5, when they added Lucky Lanterns, when they added the triple Lucky Lantern in the most recent patch, there was 2 games I played where spats dropped out of 2 of those lanterns. So everyone already had a Fawn. And we had 2 carousels with triple spats. Someone had 12 champions out on the board, is what this came down to. I had like 10 and got 5th. I don't know what to say. Stage 3 carousel, all of 1. One of all. Okay, so this went up by a good bit. I'm fine with this. 9 random components. I actually hate 9 random components. 9 random components to me means all defensive items. It's like I read it and I just like get triggered by seeing all defensive items. One of all plus 1 spat. 3 spats plus random items. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. I don't know if I like this still existing though. There's an upgrade to tiebreakers. Basically, if you were tied on health prior and after the round, the tiebreaker is who won the most recent round. That is a very, very rare situation. Yeah, that's such a rare situation. I don't know if that ever actually comes up. Overall item sets. I'm actually not going to go through all of these, but long story short is that all of these items are being weakened. So the base stats on every item is going down. Some completed item, not all of them, just some. Whatever. It looks like the only difference is that Infinity Edge didn't lose the 5% crit that from the gloves change, because they still went through 100% crit chance. Fair. That's fair. Other items. So we gotta talk about some of the items. So they've made a few more items unique. Previously, all of these items stacked and just did weird things. So Trap Claw used to stack and it doubled the stun time. But why would you do it? There's no why wouldn't you put Trap Claw on 2 different units? Sunfire Cape no longer stacks, despite how hilarious stacking Sunfire Cape was. I can't believe Riot actually took the time to make Sunfire Cape stack. It was like, what a waste of time that was. It's hilarious. It's funny. It made for some good YouTube videos, but why? Guardian Angel no longer stacks. I'm trying to remember what... Oh, it gave you increased health when you rezzed. It didn't let you res twice. It gave you increased health when you rezzed. And Frozen Heart no longer stacked. Which Frozen Heart stacking was actually a thing. That was actually a good to do. That said, usually a blue buff and a Bramble was better, but you could stack Frozen Hearts to increase the range, but we'll get into why they got rid of that and made this unique, because there is a reason for that. Bloodthirster has a new effect, where the first time the user would fall between 40% health, you would get a shield for 30% your maximum health for 5 seconds, and it still has lifesteal. Big butt the Bloodthirster, actually. From what I've seen on PvE games, Bloodthirster is a very, 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 very good item now. And more people are going to be playing it. Dragon's Claw has been reworked, so it now gives 200 bonus MR. It used to give like between 50 and 70% magic resistance. Like, when I say magic resistance, it literally just blocks 50 to 70% of someone's magic damage. Instead, now it just grants straight MR. So it's not as like ridiculously busted in various situations, but it's still like an okay item. There were certain lobbies where making a Dragon Claw got you a free win because everything did magic damage, and now you didn't take magic damage. But that's no longer true. It's still a good item, just not great. Frozen Heart attack speed slow has been reduced from 50 to 35%, but that's because its radius has been increased to 2 hexes. Frozen Heart's a very good item now. Plain and simple. It's a really good item now. Stacking double Frozen Hearts used to be a very, very good thing to do. It was a pretty situational thing, but sometimes you just kind of had to do it. But now it's been reworked so that the base item has 2 hexes and it's unique. Decent change. Gargle Stoneplate, little nerf. I'll just say there. Hands of Justice. So they reworked it so now it adds AD and ability power instead of the just straight up increased damage. This increased damage like scaled stupid hard. There's a reason like Double Hodge on Xayah was really good in 4.5. It was because it's of the scaling. Now instead it's just a scale to AD and AP, which is fine. I just don't have much else to say about it. Luden's Echo is dead and has been replaced with Archangel Staff. This is a very situational item. My understanding is that in general it's not particularly great. So the way it works is each time you cast a spell, you gain ability power for 35% of your max mana. So the reason why this isn't great is because if you put it on something that has a high mana cost, yeah, you get all the spell power, but you have to get all of that mana back again to cast a spell to blow everything up. Or if you put it on something that has a low mana cost, it doesn't gain any AP because it's only gaining 30% of like a 20 mana spell or 40 mana spell. It's not very significant to what happens in the game. So I'm not quite sure how effective this is going to be, and I suspect this number is going to go up at some point. The question is, how much can they bring it up before, when you start putting it on higher end units, that second spell cast doesn't wipe the board? So my prediction is that this is not a good item, but it's going to get a buff, and when it gets that buff, keep an eye on like what champions at the higher stages of the game just one-shot half the board. QSS, crowd control, is going from 10 to 12 seconds. It's not said here. Oh, it is said here. Okay. I'll go ahead and say it here. So one of the issues, and a lot of even the pros say QSS is really bad now. The reason for why QSS is bad now is actually because Zephyr was changed. Zephyr now pierces CC immunity, so you can now Zephyr units with a Quicksilver. I'm not sure how I feel about that. On one hand, it makes Zephyr less of a dead item at certain points in the game, but at the same time, like, it makes QSS so weak that it can't stop a Zephyr. We're going to have to see what happens with this particular interaction. I'm thinking it might not stay. I don't think there's really an issue with it. I think it could stay in the game, but it might be something that enough people complain about goes away. I actually already played a PvE game where I hit a dude who had QSS with Zephyr, and he was like, what? His mind was utterly blown, and I had to point out Zephyr now goes through QSS. And he was like, oh, what? He was just so confused as to why Zephyr went through QSS. So, in general, you're probably never going to make QSS. We'll talk about Shadow QSS, which is a good bit better and might actually be useful. But it's also worth noting that this set has way less crowd control than the last set. Rapid Fire Cannon. The opponent's attack range is now not just like 200... God. Why couldn't we just say attack ranges? So it's now +1 hex. It also now increases attack speed, a heavy compensation for losing attack range. This isn't a bad item. I just haven't seen how it's used. It's not as good on ranged units, but it's really good on melee units. Kind of like the previous Rapid Fire Cannon. Really good on close quarters units. Or a Kale. Because Kale does Kale things. Redemption has been reworked. This was an interesting one because Redemption, I think a lot of people thought was in a good place for the game. It wasn't a bad item. It wasn't a great item. Not many people made it. But it was, like, okay. Especially, like, in the early game. It basically made it so it was pretty hard to lose matches in the rounds in the early game. It did scale pretty poorly in the late game, though. But anyway, this has actually been significantly reworked, and I think it's been nerfed a few times since it's been reworked. So now the wearer radiates an aura to all allies within 1 hex, healing them for 25% of their missing health every 5 seconds. Allies affected by the aura take 40% reduced damage from area of effect attacks. That's big. That does a lot of stuff. This is a very good item. Like I said, it has been nerfed a few times, so I'm not sure if it's as good as it was before. But I've had good experiences using it on champions that are, like, super tanky. And there's plenty of those in this set. Morello Nomicon healing reduction reduced from 75 to 50%. Yeah, Morello kind of destroyed all healing, rather than just hurting all healing. Part of the reason for this is that there's a lot more healing this set than there has been in previous sets. You'll find a lot of champions that have bonus inherent effects in either their trait or ability or items that heal themselves. And the main reason for having those effects is because shadow items often have some sort of negative modifier that makes them take damage over time of some kind. So this is probably a change that's just for this set, but we'll see what the standards for TFT are going to be in the long run in terms of, are we going to have as many champions as we have in this current set that have, like, self-heals. Hurricane Bolt damage goes from 80 to 75% attack damage. Why didn't they do this before? Spear of Sojin now grants mana on attack instead of hit, thereby removing its synergy with Hurricane. So, this is what they changed. This is why they changed it. It also now grants 8 mana instead of 5. That's a, like, really big change. This is probably something to look out for. 8 mana is lots. They did a bunch of shit to Shiv that I'm not going to bother to read because it's actually still a pretty terrible item. Titan Resolve stacks now increase AD and AP by 2 instead of the increased damage by 2%. So each stack now gets you 2% AD AP increase rather than 2%. So this just makes it much better in the early game, but not as like crazy in the late game is what this does. Because instead of getting a percentage increase of damage, you're now getting a hard increase on attack damage and AP. Later in the game, you would have rather had this percent, but early in the game, this is better. Zeke's, they lowered the attack. I wonder why this took so long to put in. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't read this beforehand, so I kind of missed this one. I wonder what took them so long to put this in. Zeke's has kind of been kind of crazy the past few patches. It's been about 2 to 3 months that Zeke's has been one of the best items in the game to like make in the early game. We talked about Zephyr. ZZ taunt now happens immediately. So right now there's actually a delay in the taunt. I can't remember why they put that delay in place. It's because of assassins. So the assassins would jump, but the taunt had already gone off and it wouldn't taunt the assassins. This makes more sense. Taunt is an instant effect that no longer compels enemies that are taunted to chase the target away for 1 second. Instead, enemies can retarget once it's no longer in range. So basically, if the ZZ Rot moves out of range, they're just not going to target it anymore. But you're compelled to chase after it for 1 second. It's fair. This is a fair change since they fixed assassins. This is fine. ZZ Rot health and attack damage now scale based off current stage, rather than the star level of the wearer. I don't know about that change. I guess it makes sense because ZZ Rot was such a good item in the early game. If you put on a 2-star champion, the bug was like really hard to kill. Summoned units will not spawn out of the void spawn in 11.9, but will in future patches at a reduced capacity. This is a temporary fix to balance an issue that came placed both ZZ Rot and Shadow component. So there's an issue with Abomination, and this came up in some tournaments. So to be specific of what's going on here, there's an issue with Abomination. Abominations could summon a ZZ Rot bug because you could get the ZZ Rot on the Abomination, and it was without a doubt the best composition in the game was to have an Abomination composition with a ZZ Rot that ended up on the Abomination. This was because it made the Abominations already like really hard to kill, but you also now gave it a taunt effect, and you had a bug that was super powered when the Abomination died. Same thing with the Shadow version. Like this made for an incredibly strong composition. So for now, they've established a temporary fix where the Abomination will not summon a ZZ Rot bug. This is temporary. Who knows when this is going to be fixed? Like I said, the main reason for this is because the comp was busted. I had to read this a few times to figure out what they were talking about. They're talking about the ZZ Rot with Abomination. Now for the new things. Shadow items. So the big new feature of this set is shadow items. When you combine a shadow component with a regular component, or even another shadow component, you get a shadow item. So let's go through the list of some of the new shadow items. Sacrificial Infinity Edge. Gain 75% crit chance, and each point above 100% becomes an extra 1% crit strike damage. The holder also gains 30% crit strike damage. Each time the holder critically strikes, they'll deal 3% of their maximum health to themselves as true damage. This isn't bad. Generally, this just means this is basically better than Infinity Edge, so long as you have some way to self-heal. And there are plenty of ways to do this in this set. It doesn't make IE bad, but this is probably a better item in general, particularly on Assassins. Just make sure that, particularly on Assassins, that you have a self-heal. Recommend Bloodthirster. New Bloodthirster is a very strong item. Dark Shroud of Stillness. So this is a new shroud that increases maximum mana cost by 65%. You're not going to see this often, nor should you be making this item, because you usually don't make shrouds till the end game, and you probably will not have a shadow component left at the end game. So you're not. This shouldn't be a thing you make. Trickster's gloves. The shadowed thieves gloves will now always have shadow items. I recommend never making this. Sounds dangerous. These items could be very non-synergistic and easily kill whatever champion they're on. Don't make this item. Vengeful Trapclaw. Vengeful Trapclaw is really cool. So it'll block the enemy ability and then teleport them to the caster, causing both units to target each other. And they deal 25% increased damage to each other. So this is actually a pretty good item. That's very strange. If you have a champion that like 1v1s really well, or you have a like tanky champion, you're trying to block an assassin from getting to your backline, this is actually a pretty good item to stop that from happening. And hopefully, if your units target correctly, you can blow up whatever you're trying to hit. Like, if your unit is tanky enough or has high enough damage, this could easily be a free kill on a lot of champions. Caustic Quicksilver, completely immune to crowd control effects for the rest of combat, and a 20% maximum health decrease. This is a fine item. This is definitely better than base QSS. It's just because usually the champions you put it on, you just don't want attacked anyway, and you want to make sure that they're continuously attacking. So this is definitely better than base QSS, because if they're getting attacked, you've already probably lost. Final Whisper, when the holder inflicts a crit, both the target's armor and magic resist are reduced by 50% for 5 seconds. The holder's armor and magic resist is also reduced permanently by 25%. This is kind of like more of a backline utility item, in my opinion. If you have a champion that hits multiple targets with its like autos, or has like I don't think can Hurricane crit anymore? I honestly don't remember. They've changed that a few times. I think it can crit, but anyway, if you have something that can like spam high crit chance, hit a lot of units, that's what you would put this on. You really probably shouldn't put this on your carry, because this does risk your carry getting like one shot because they critted so much. Sacrificial Gauntlet, the holder's magic and true damage from the abilities can critical strike. The holder gains 40% magic damage, 20% crit strike chance. After the holder initially casts their ability, they lose 50% of their max health. This is actually stupid strong. I've seen this. This thing will just blow everything up, including yourself. It's not that this is a bad item. What this is... Oh, I forgot. What this is particularly good on is units don't cast abilities. So anything that like you want to get critical strikes with, but doesn't cast an ability. Right now, the main target of that is Vayne. You can put this on Vayne, and it just deals shitloads of damage, and you get none of this downside. Don't be surprised if this negative impact changes, just based off that fact that there are champions that don't cast abilities. Hand of Vengeance. At the beginning of combat, you gain both of the following. You gain the additional ability power and heal for 40% of damage dealt. These bonuses expire after each takedown and renew on the next. So, essentially, this is Hodge, but you get both effects until you kill something. And then after you kill something, you lose the effect, and then it comes back after you do kill something. It's not a bad item. I think it's probably better than Hodge in general, but it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Spectre Shojin, restore 40%, 14 mana on hit, but you deal 20% less damage. So the problem with this item is that Tear, from what my understanding, well, really, Tear and Sword are both pretty important items in this set. So oftentimes you don't want to be using them to be making this for your carry. Like, these are important items for carries. Because of this line right here, you don't put this on a carry. But there's a couple utility champions that do take advantage of this if you end up in a situation where you do have it. I don't think Kindred's a good example. I'm trying to think of some good examples of champions. Basically anything with like a CC effect or anything with, really just anything with like a CC effect. This is fairly strong on, but you have to understand that these two components are used for carries. And to use both of them on something that will not be your carry is kind of awful. That's kind of bad. Dark Frozen Heart reduces attack speed of all enemies within 2 hexes by 50%. The attack speed of allies, except the holder, within 1 hex is reduced by 50%. Not a bad item, but you kind of have to put it on assassins. You don't want to have your frontliners slowing down the rest of your front line. You'd rather just have a Frozen Heart on your front line, which has a fairly similar effect. But if you do end up making one, putting it on assassin is pretty optimal. Sacrificial Redemption, the holder radiates an aura on all allies on the board except himself and heals them for 20% their missing health every 5 seconds. Each time this happens, the holder damages himself for 10% of their current health as true damage. This is a bad item, don't make it. Chalice of Malice, at the beginning of combat, the holder's allies within 1 hex in the same row gain 40 AP power for the rest of the combat. The holder loses 20 AP instead of gaining any. This is a good item. It's effectively Chalice, but you just put it on the worst champion rather than a champion that would benefit from it. So you can think of this as a 2-unit Chalice, really. Just make sure that you put it on a unit that's not going to benefit greatly from, or not going to be detrimental from losing AP. Fine item. Nothing wrong with making it, especially if you end up with like a Dark Cloak, a Shadow Cloak, and you have a tier left over. It's a decent enough early item to make. Static Stiletto, I'm ignoring it. It's a bad item. Archmage's Staff, you can look at it. It's similar. It has this negative damage. This thing's bad. Don't make it. Archmage's Staff of Immortality. Each time the holder casts their ability, they gain empty maximum. Wait, let me read that again. That's awkwardly worded. Each time the holder casts their ability, they gain empty maximum health equal to 300% their maximum mana. The holder then heals for that health that was gained from the ability cast. I got nothing on this. I'm trying to think where it's useful. I assume that there are some decent frontliners that would benefit from this. I don't really think your carries really benefit from this. Your backliners definitely don't carry from this. So I guess this might be an okay frontline item. I don't know. This is a weird one. I don't recall. I wonder if they changed this ability, because I don't actually recall this item when I've been playing PvE. Very dark blue buff. It's very dark, guys. After casting an ability, the holder gains 15 mana. If the holder has less than 60% health, this is increased to 50. I guess this is okay. Effectively, it'll function as a blue buff. Just instead of being 20, it's 15. It seems okay. I don't think it's great. Yeah, this is just basically blue buff. It's just, in most circumstances, is going to be less effective, but in some circumstances, is going to be very impactful. Don't forget, there is still the mana lock, so if you put it on a champion that has 50 or less mana, they're not going to insta-cast. They're going to cast a lot, but they're not going to insta-cast. That, and if they have an ability that self-heals, they could go over this again, and then you're back to here. Just some things to think about when you're placing this item. Gunblade of Immortality. The holder's magic and 2 damage from ability heals the nearest ally with missing health for 60% of the damage buff. This healing cannot affect the holder. Okay, so it's Gunblade, but actually I believe this does more healing, but it doesn't heal itself. I guess there's a handful of champions that this is okay on. I'd hate to have to put this on a carry, though. Yeah, I think that probably is what really hurts this item, is that it makes most sense to put on a carry, but you're not going to put this on a carry. Locket. Holder and all units within 2 hexes the same row gain 60 magic on its armor, but gain 5 less mana per attack. I guess you just put this on frontline. This is probably just fine to put on frontliners. I don't think this is a big deal if you're if you're putting like standard frontliners that you don't really care about their abilities, and as long as you keep the ones that have CC like off the line, this is probably fine to put on all your frontliners. Yeah, I think in general you would rather just have base locket, but if you end up with a situation where you can make this in the early game, it's a pretty good item. Actually, it's a pretty busted item early game. 60 armor and magic resist is really strong. But that said, this negative impact here will get more significant as the game moves on. Whereas the bonus effect of this and locket in general gets weaker as the game goes on. That said, this is very strong in the early game. So if you make it, it's not like there wasn't a reason to make it. More evil Namocon. More evil. Whoever made this name should get shot. I'm not joking about that. When the holder deals magic damage with their ability, they burn the target, dealing 100% of the unit's maximum health as true damage over 25 seconds, reducing healing by 50 per second, but the holder deals 50% less damage. So, this item in general, you would almost always, most certainly, rather make normal Morello. Almost certainly. But there is a place for this, particularly in like frontline heavy compositions that are like super tanky, just don't want to die. You have Lights and Knights, Skirmishers, Nidalee, just stuff that just doesn't like to die. Then this is okay to put on a champion that casts a weak AoE spell. It's fine, but you'd almost certainly always rather have normal Morello. But if you end up in a situation where you slam this, it's like, okay, whatever. Enemies and allies get zapped when they cast ability, take magic damage equal to their maximum mana. Enemies take 200% of their maximum mana. Allies take 100%. Whenever an ally or an enemy is zapped, the holder gains 5 ability power for the rest of combat. This is actually a pretty good ability, I think, especially if your frontline has like high mana cost. Or maybe you were using an item that made it so you cast spells at a much slower rate because your attacks generate less mana. Oh, combo. I don't know if this is just straight up better than regular Ionic Spark, but it isn't bad. There's no reason why you can't make it and be happy about it. Kindred Sacrificial Rageblade. You gain attack speed for the rest of combat. Bonus attack speed can stack multiple times. The holder deals 2.5% of their maximum health as true damage each attack is dealt, so they take damage. So this is functionally similar to regular Rageblade, but you attack faster, and you gain more. The key thing about this is, like I said, with the sacrificial IE, is to make sure that you have some sort of self-heal. It's perfectly fine to make this. There's nothing wrong with making this. If you have this in a Bloodthirster, it's better than a regular Rageblade in a Bloodthirster. So just make sure that when you're making this, whatever unit you put it on has some form of healing, usually in the form of Bloodthirster. Like I said, Bloodthirster is a very good item this set. Rabadon's Caustic Deathblade grants 100 ability power, including components, and minus 20% maximum health. Yeah, this is fine. It functions identical to regular Deathcap, but you're not going to make it very often because you need double rod to make it, and oftentimes you're going to split your rods between 2 items, like a Jewel Gauntlet and a Morello, or a Jewel Gauntlet and Gunblade. So that's generally the reason why we don't see too much Deathcap in the game, is because it's almost always more efficient to split your rods between 2 items rather than slamming together to make 1 item. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with this item. I think even like the 20% hit max health, it's whatever, who cares? 100 ability power is a lot of ability power. But in general, when you have rod items, you don't use both of them to make a Deathcap. You're going to use them to make 2 different rod items. Caustic Deathblade. Yeah, this stack's actually really high. This is another good item. This is another good item to make. It's really, really good on my understanding is that it's really good on Aphelios. This is actually like one of Aphelios' best items. Fallen GA prevents users' first halt for 2 seconds to come back at 80% health. So you come back at a lot higher health, but your attack speed is reduced by 50% the rest of the combat. This item is trash. Do not make it. Zeke's Bleak Herald. I actually love this dumb item. This is actually one of my favorite items in the game right now. So Zeke's Bleak Herald makes it so all allies within 1 hex in the same row, they take an attack speed nerf, or get hit with lower attack speed, but the wielder has an extra 40% attack speed. This is actually a fun item, especially in my opinion on assassins, because you could sneak your assassin in the front line, have it steal attack speed from 2 frontliners that don't need attack speed, and then just go to town. This is a fine item. There's nothing wrong with it. Bloodthirster, physical damage, heals the holder for 40%. The damage dealt. Each time the holder heals for 90% health, they gain 300% attack speed. The holder takes 33% of their maximum health as true damage at the beginning of combat. Good item. Good item. Good item. Yeah, this is functionally, to me, I would basically play this when I play Bloodthirster. The main difference between the two is that you're probably going to want Bloodthirster more often on your frontline champions, or on like champions that you expect to get hit, whereas Bloodthirster makes a bit more sense on champions you don't expect to get hit. So like an Aphelios. On an Aphelios, he can gain back that health through his attacks and his spells and get this attack speed buff after taking this hit, whereas some of your assassins might not get up to that point. Some of them will, but some of them won't. In general, though, I don't think there's a lot of difference between this item and Bloodthirster. This item might even be strictly better in most situations. Evil Giant Slayer. Holder's abilities and attacks do 50% bonus damage. I want you all to read that again. The holder's abilities and attacks do 50% bonus damage. If the target has less than 1,000 maximum health, the abilities and attacks do 15% decrease in damage instead. This is a bad item. Do not make this item. Especially in the early game. Do not make this item in the early game. If you make it in the late game or have it in the late game, fine. But you most certainly do not want to make this in the early game where nothing has this much health. Titan's Revenge. Every 3 seconds, the holder's next basic attack deals 25% total damage they have taken since the last Empired attack is 2 damage. So I think they changed this item. I don't remember this ability, but this is hilarious to me. Good. It's not a bad item. It's the only issue with this item is that the only like real issue with this item is that you're using a defensive component here, but you're not really gaining a defensive effect. You're just getting this rebound damage effect. Unstable ZZ Rot. So you make a minion that dies, it deals 602 damage to one enemy. So in my experience, this item's pretty. I mean, this item's free in the early game, but in the late game, the 602 damage is pretty bad. It's great in the early game, really good. But in the late game, this falls off really hard, and it was basically a useless item you made. And you used a bow to make it, which is a little awkward. Hurricane. Holders attacks fire 2 higher bolts that deal 50% damage. These critically strike, but do not apply on hit. So that answers my question of Hurricane striking. Yeah, this is a good item, actually. Yeah. This is a good item. It's probably better than regular Hurricane. And in most situations you would use it, it's probably better a lot. But, yeah. I really don't have much else to say about this. This is a good item to make, I think. Being able, especially when you can combine it with Deathblade, or other abilities that trigger on, like, takedowns, or on hit. So, good item. Eclipse Cape. So this is belt and vest. Every 1.5 random enemy within 3 hexes is burned for 10 seconds. Healing is reduced. The holder is burned. Every second I heal it. So it's Sunfire Cape, but it's more burn, and you get burned too. This is every second. Ugh. It is a pretty good amount of burn. I just don't know if it's worthwhile to make. Yeah, I don't know about this item. When like sacrificial armor, you gain 1800 health, and you take 100 true damage every second. I don't like this item. Turbulent Zephyr. When combat begins, summon a whirlwind. So essentially, this is Zephyr, but it lasts longer. It lasts really long, but when they come back in, they get a extra AD and AP boost. In general, I think this is a good item in the late game. Even in the early game, it's not bad, because 8 seconds is really long. That's a very long time for a unit to be out of combat. And this cost of extra AD and AP, it's not really that significant. Where it will be significant is if that champion is still alive and you don't kill it, and it is able to run through the rest of your team. Gargle Stone Plate of Immortality. User heals itself for 45 health every 2 seconds for each unit targeting them. It's okay. I don't think this is great. But it is a self-heal, which is probably kind of relevant in the current, in this game type right now. I would probably save my vest to make something better, though. And even my cloak. You can make some okay items with cloak. Refracted Bramble Vest grants 200 bonus armor. Good item. Refracted Dragon's Claw reduces incoming magic damage by 15%, but more importantly, negates bonus damage from incoming critical hits. So it negates crits, essentially. This is actually a very good item. So functionally, it's similar to Bramble, but being able to use double cloak to get this crit resistance is very good. This is a very good item. And if you get cloak and shadow cloak, I think it's perfectly reasonable to slam this. Rapid Death Cannon. You increase range, you get the attack speed boost when there are no enemies within 2 hexes, and the holder's attacks can't miss. Isn't this strictly better than the new Rapid Fire Cannon? I'm going to have to scroll up and check that out. Isn't this strictly better, essentially? Yeah, because it went from 20 to 40% attack speed bonus with 1 hex. So this is just strictly better. Well, you have to be within... Okay. When there are no enemies within 2 hexes, but you can no longer miss. I guess with the change to dodge chance, being able to impact physical abilities, this is fine. The way I see it is that this is, as long as you're using a ranged attacker, it makes it so this always has to go on ranged attackers. That's kind of how I'm viewing this. Because if it's on a ranged attacker, oftentimes the enemy will be out of this 2 hex range because your range will be 3+. Whereas on the regular rapid fire cannon, the range is always inside 2 hexes. I guess that makes sense. Spat items. So the other thing is there's a shadow spatula. So you now have to memorize all of the shadow spats. That said, they have changed the icons for all of the spat items. It's now this emblem that is identical to the emblem of that particular class or trait. So you don't have to memorize it what each of them kind of makes, but you should kind of have an idea of what each of them makes. The big change is Shadow Fawn. Shadow Fawn, the big difference on that is I believe you take double damage to your life with Shadow Fawn. But you get 2 extra slots rather than just 1. So that's nice. Anyway, that's it for all of this set. I'm not going to do a video that talks about the individual champions because I haven't really played them enough to really know what's up. But I have played enough to say that this set I think will be a good bit better than the previous set, mostly because it chose mechanics down. That said, I think the learning curve on this set will probably be a bit higher for your average player because of just how many items they have added into the game. It's probably my biggest worry of this set, is that the shadow item system added a ton of items into the game, and therefore made it a lot more complicated for your average player, just trying to figure out what they're doing. Because that's always where there are two learning curves for TFT. One is understanding items and item optimization, and two is learning the champions and compositions. And when I say learning the champions and compositions, I don't mean looking at this table and learning this table. I mean learning like what champions are your carries, what champions provide good utility, what sort of formations do I use with these champions. I'm not even talking about opening up a chart that tells you all the compositions you should be running. Just understanding who carries what comps. So those particular things, I think, have probably been made a little worse in this set. But it will be better than the chosen mechanic, which I think just put too much randomness at the end game and made the end game kind of spiral out of control for some people. But I am looking forward to this set. I'll probably start playing some games, maybe on Friday, definitely on Saturday, for people who want to watch. So I hope you all tune in and enjoy it. Enjoy the new set. I think it's already out in OCE. Peace.